Can you get good quality audio from an inexpensive USB mic and no fancy audio equipment or expertise? Absolutely. Let me tell you about it. I got a comment on my last video from Unlimited Spot 4658. I would like to know, how do you make your sound great if possible? Well, thank you for the compliment, Unlimited Spot 4658, and I am happy to share what I know. I'm not an audio expert by any means. Frankly, I've been wrestling with my audio lately, and perhaps this is a really good time because it's all fresh in my head. Everything I learned, along with the frustration. To make sure we're not comparing apples to oranges here, or Macs to PCs, as it were, let me tell you what I'm working with. I'm recording on a PC using Windows 11. I have a cheap USB dynamic microphone. It's called the Fifine Amplirocket. Fifine? I don't know, something like that. I don't think they even make it anymore. Yeah, it's got these LED tails that look like it's going to launch off into space, which is not something I really need, but hey, the price was right, so I live with them. Being a USB mic, it goes straight into the computer, no audio interface, no mixing boards, no cloud lifters, no fancy schmancy, nothing. Just plug it right into the computer. For video, I have a Sony ZV-1, which I absolutely love, and I use it in USB streaming mode. It plugs right into the computer via USB, and you select it like you would any other webcam, as long as you have the camera flipped into USB streaming mode. I also have a Logitech StreamCam that I use sometimes, but it is so light hungry that if you don't just blast light in the room, at least mine, it feels like you're shooting in a cave, and that's no good. The software I use to record videos varies. I use Camtasia, I've used PowerDirector, Descript, OBS, and several others. I like recording with Descript the best because it automatically transcribes my audio recording so that I can then work with my editing via the text on the screen. So I can actually see what was said. And if I cut out a word in the text, I'm cutting it out of the video and the audio at the same time. That makes it really easy to go through on my first pass and get rid of super long pauses, like when I stop to collect my thoughts after I've had a brain fart, and I don't stop the recording. I just sort of stare at the ceiling for a few minutes. Those are easy to cut out. Really bad takes are easy to wipe out there too, because they stick out in the text quite obviously. So I don't have to muddle through the whole timeline, at least for that part of the editing process. Recently, I started noticing two problems with my audio, and I set out to fix them. First and most notable issue that I had was audio drift, and that's where your audio and video are in sync at the beginning of your recording, but as time goes along, it drifts just a little bit out of sync more and more as you go, so that by the time you're 10 minutes into a video, my lips were moving well before the words were coming out of my mouth. That was horribly distracting, and that had to go. And with audio drift, it's not a matter of just syncing it up right in the beginning. I mean, I'm recording it at the same time into the same file. So that's not the issue at all. The issue is that as time goes on, either the video or the audio is taking a little bit longer. It starts off no issue. You get in the middle of the video and you see some issue. And then by the time you get to the end, like I say, just over a 10-minute video, it's so far off, it's horrible. Now, in the beginning, the way that I addressed this audio drift issue was I would split the file to a separate video and audio file after I recorded, and then I would go figure out what the difference was, how much drift there was at the end, and then I would use a clip speed effect and whatever video software I was using to speed up the audio ever so slightly, just a teeny bit, but that made all the difference in getting it to line up with the video. Then I found that OBS had this setting where you could delay your audio by so many milliseconds. Well, I didn't need to delay my audio, I needed to speed it up. Easy enough, I could go in there and set the microphone to delay by minus however many milliseconds it was to keep everything in sync. And that worked fine, but I don't want to be limited to just recording in OBS, and I don't want to be limited to having to always use OBS as a virtual camera or virtual mic to go into some other recording software. That just seems like too much. After ruling out everything else, I turned to this little capture card that I had installed in there and found that indeed it was the problem. Now, it's a cheap little capture card that someone on YouTube said worked pretty well for them. They had good luck with it. I did not, so that thing is gone, and that solved my audio drift problem. The second major issue I had was this hissing, staticky sound that was driving me bonkers. I could reduce it during editing, but that was leaving me with one of two other problems, sometimes both. One was that if you really paid attention, you'd notice that the hissing was indeed gone, or significantly reduced during those pauses, like between sentences and whatnot, but it was still there over top of the words when I was speaking. So you wouldn't hear it when everything was silent in that couple of milliseconds, and you may or may not pick up on it over my words. I picked up on it when I was speaking. I could tell that static was still there, and that did not make me happy. Not happy. Not happy. The second issue that I would encounter with that is if I ramped up the editing too much, if I did too much to it, it would end up chopping off part of the words I was speaking, usually at the beginning of a sentence. Or if I was talking in a normal volume and then had some other low volume, soft talking in amongst there, those quieter words would just get muted out and disappear. And that was no good. Of course, I read, watched a ton of videos, and researched like mad to try and figure out what caused this issue and how to get rid of it. As usual, I ignored all the simple stuff at first because really, it can't be that simple, can it? I don't have any AC units, fans, or nuclear generators running in this room, so nothing to worry about there. I swapped out the USB cable, no difference. I switched where I was connecting my microphone from the back USB hole of my computer to the front USB hole. Oddly enough, that did reduce the noise, that staticky noise, by about half, but it was still pretty noticeable. The mic I'm using does not have a gain adjustment knob on it. There's no software for this microphone. In fact, it just uses a generic driver, so there's literally nothing to adjust with the microphone, which is, I guess, a pro or a con. The only place I could make any adjustments was in the Windows sound settings. I wasn't very confident in this idea, but there under the sound settings, the input devices, you can adjust the input volume anywhere between 0 and 100. I didn't have a clue what number this was supposed to be on, and my limited audio experience from putting together and installing obnoxious car audio systems in the 80s and 90s didn't offer me any help at all with this issue. So I just picked a number, set the input volume at 80, and then recorded myself saying exactly what I was doing. This is the Fi-Fi microphone plugged into the front USB hole. I have the Windows device input settings level set at 80. But before I even listened to that, I kept recording at different input volumes. So I would just switch it to 85, keep on recording and say, this is the Fi-Fi plugged into the front USB hole with the volume set at 85. And I intentionally left a little space there because I wanted to hear what the room tone sounded like when I wasn't talking so that I could really hear that static if it was there or not before any editing. So I just kept doing the same thing at, 4 or 5 different volume levels, and then I played it back. And by having it all on one track, that made life pretty easy because as I just played through it or skipped from one to another, I could hear what it sounds like. And when I found the one that sounded the best, it was pretty obvious what the settings were because I had recorded those into the test itself. So, gee, I like the way this sounds, and this one is saying I have the volume set at 95. Well, hey, that's what we need to do, is set the input volume to 95 to get that sound again. Since there are literally no other equipment or recording settings to work with on this mic, there was nothing else I could do from a tech aspect, at least not in the pre-production or production phase. I mean, I consider these gadgets that plug into the wall and are supposed to give you clean power, or they've got some other USB middleman device that's supposed to filter out any bad signal, noise or whatever the heck it is. But those were kind of expensive, and I thought, okay, let me go back to these easy things that are not going to work and rule them out at least first. I really didn't think they were going to help, but I was wrong. Apparently, the distance and position of the microphone really do make a huge difference. Depending on who you ask, you're supposed to have the mic somewhere between 2 and 12 inches away from your mouth hole. Get too close and the plosives will kill you. Get too far away and the volume is way too low. But wait, I keep hearing smart people say that low volume is good. The only thing you need to stay away from is high volume because you can boost up the volume in editing, but there's nothing you can do to get rid of plosives and clipping, so lower is better. Well, there's a caveat that my dumbass missed along the way, and I don't know the technical aspects of all this, but if you're too far away from the mic, it seems to pick up more of the room tone, those ambient noises in the room. All that white noise that you don't even notice when you're sitting in the room in real life, but your microphone picks it up and makes it sound horrible. I also think, and I don't know, so audio engineers and smart people, feel free to chime in here and set me straight, but I feel like the microphone is sort of listening. So if there's nothing being said, if it's just the room tone, I feel like the microphone has to open up its little electronic ears a little more, trying to find what it's supposed to be hearing and recording. But when you're speaking and you're close to it, then it knows what it's hearing. It's catching your voice like it's supposed to, and it can sort of close up its little electronic ears a bit and doesn't have to try so hard. So it doesn't have to pull in all that extra unwanted static and white noise and whatever's going on. Maybe that's what dynamic means in dynamic microphone. For me and my setup, what I find works best is if I have my microphone somewhere between a fist and a wingspan away from my mouth. So fist, sorry, don't mean to block, but I just put it between the mic like that. And then for the wingspan, like that. Which, by the way, if I'm sitting back in my chair, I'm about a wingspan. And in this position where I'm at, if I lean forward toward it, I'm comfortably at about a fist. So as long as I don't lean into a really weird, uncomfortable position, I'm not going to get too close, and I can't go back any further than I'm going back. So I'm in pretty good shape there. Now, wingspan isn't an accepted technical term. It just works for me. So please forgive me. And I know it sounds way too simple, but apparently keeping the mic in the happy zone makes a big difference. Like, it just works. Now, since I do not have a studio or a sound booth or whatever the heck you call it, and an audio engineer to get me all set up and make sure everything's perfect, I do end up with audio that's not so great sometimes, and that's where post-production editing software comes in. Again, I like Descript for this because in most cases, one click of studio sound makes mediocre audio sound really, really good. But it can't fix everything. Plosives and clipping, to my knowledge, are just not fixable. There's also the issue of cutting off words, especially at the beginning of a sentence or those other like low volume in amongst louder words or phrases deal I talked about earlier. Now, if the audio is already pretty decent quality and this is just putting the polish on it, that doesn't seem to happen. But if studio sound has to do a lot of work to get this cleaned up, that's where those issues seem to appear the most. Now, Descript isn't the only tool to clean up audio, and definitely not even the only one that I've ever used. It's just really good, and it's one click. Camtasia has a noise reduction filter that you can apply to your audio. It does a pretty good job for minor fixes, and it's fairly simple. They also have their companion program, Audiate, which I just cannot deal with. I've tried it twice, and the going back and forth and it just doesn't work for me. I can't deal with it. Power Director 365 Suite, that comes with not only the Power Director video editor, which has a lot of features, but it also comes with Audio Director, and that has all kinds of tools for fixing, enhancing, and analyzing audio. And I've used that to clean up some things that needed a little extra help. Adobe also has something now where you can upload your audio file, it'll clean it up and spit out a cleaned up audio file for you. It's similar to how Studio Sound works, but I prefer to use Descript because I don't have to upload or download a file or anything like that. Plus I've got the transcription built in, the video editor built in, captions, all that, everything's just right there in one place. So my audio comes from a cheap dynamic mic plugged into a Windows PC using one of many different softwares to record. And the biggest improvement I've seen to my audio quality is just keeping my mouth hole closer to the mic. Not too close, not too far away. You'll also notice I don't have a windscreen or a pop filter on here, and I probably should. I think that would help. If you're curious about the video that prompted the compliment that then led to this video, I'll put it up right here somewhere-ish. And I'll put links to all the things I talked about here in the description below. Some of them might be affiliate links, some are not.